All right. It's not a Thursday night. It's not a Friday night. It's a Wednesday night. And we've got three of us co hosts on one podcast, and we've got two extraordinary guests. This is going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who haven't been following, we just had the Ironman World Championship up in St. George for 2022, but it was really the 2021 World Championship. And what a great, challenging course. And we have two distinguished guests here that are really bookending our age groups. And both of these folks are world champions. And we've got Rick Simpson in the 70 to 74 age group and Justin Reali from the 25-29 age group. And this is going to be so much fun talking with you, picking your brain, getting some stories. And I'm looking forward to some of the chaos that we'll have tonight. But before we get going too far, I gotta ask you, how are the legs doing?
Legs are better. Let's say that.
Yeah, I'm
Justin?
doing all right. I think all things considered, way better than my first two Ironmans. I don't think I was walking for a week, but got in the pool twice, Monday and Tuesday, just for an easy 1,000 yards, and I think that helped a lot. So hanging in there.
That's good. That's good to hear. All right, Bob, kick us off.
All right, thank you, John. As John mentioned, today we not only have two world-class athletes with us, we have two newly crowned Ironman champions, and this is World Championship. Rick Simpson and Justin Riele, and both of these, as John said, won their respective age groups. Justin Riele, he not only won the 29 to the 25 to 29 age group, he delivered. Several people don't know this. He delivered the fourth fastest time of any United States athlete, the 12th fastest time of any world athlete, amateur, and he was the fastest amateur under 30 years old. So I mean, just that by itself is incredible. On top of the fact that he's got the world championship title now. Now Rick Simpson has completed 26 full Ironman races, and 12 of those were world championship races. So it's like we've got two pretty elite athletes. So gentlemen, congratulations. That was just an incredible performance on what a lot of people are saying is the most grueling, toughest course in the world, toughest Ironman course in the world. So I mean, it's just very impressive, and we're really glad to have you on tonight. So I just want to start with you, Rick. My jaw was on the floor whenever I read your race report. It was just astounding. If people haven't read it, we're going to let Rick kind of recap that a little bit. But what was going through your mind the morning of the race when you were getting ready for it and you were downing all this ice cream? It's like, I want to hear this. And then, okay, I'm going to let you tell them. For the you can recap your swim. So go ahead, lead us up to the swim, and then tell us about that.
Well, I'll start the day before. Usually the day before I go on a liquid diet, and I count liquid as anything that gets up to body temperature and in fact is liquid. So the reason that I'll eat, and I'm vegan, so the reason I'll have the vegan ice cream is that there's a lot of calories there in a relatively small package. When I get up in the morning, I generally will consume 2 pints of the vegan ice cream, which will get me somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 calories.
Okay, 2 pints of ice cream in your belly, getting ready to go swim.
And of course, it's fairly early in the morning, so generally, at least, and it worked very well in Coeur d'Alene, which was very hot last summer. But this year, we didn't even think about it. We got chocolate. Well, for some reason, the chocolate does not get into my system as well. And so that caused me problems later on, problems in the swim and problems in the early bike, as well as ended up being throughout the day, but especially on the bike.
No. Tell us about the swim.
Okay,
so how you did this.
Well, first of all, the swim is, they sent us off 10 at a time every 10 seconds. So you would think, well, there wasn't a lot of wind out there. The water would be really flat. Nah, not really. It's fairly choppy. There were a bunch of swimmers. And I swam 110, which is not particularly good for me. But there were a number of those 40 to 44s who were in the heat in front of me who couldn't go 110. And this happens in Hawaii too. In Hawaii, I'll go 106 has been my most frequent time in Hawaii. Probably can't do that anymore. But what would happen in Hawaii is I'd get out of the water and say 106 or 107, and then jump on the bike, and I'd get on the bike pretty fast. I like to do transitions fast, and I'd get out on the course, and I could tell you how much drafting there was going on because these guys are all going by me. If you're 40 to 44 and you can only swim a 115, and some 60-some-year-old guy goes 106, if you qualified for Hawaii, you got to go under 10 hours. And that means your bike's got to be bombing. And so these guys are coming past me in Kona like crazy. And if there's a lot of drafting, I'll see it because these guys will hook up and they'll draft past me, and they'll kind of hang on to each other. And there have been years that there's been a lot of drafting, and there's years that there hasn't been. So it just depends on the year, but I tend to see it.
Okay.
So anyway, the water I thought was fairly choppy in the and probably due to the number of competitors, I think. And sometimes I have trouble swimming straight, and I was having some trouble swimming straight periodically. I'd go okay for a while, and then I'd kind of veer off one way or another. And it seems to be more of a problem when I have a wetsuit on than when I don't. And I'm not completely sure about why. I know I'm doing something. I probably need to take my old wetsuit next year when I'm getting ready. I think I'll probably do Tulsa. When I'm getting ready for Tulsa and, at the end of May, in March, do workouts with my wetsuit on, figure out what's going on and to get used to it, But anyway, I got about 75% of the way through the swim, and all of a sudden, I just felt like crap, and and I vomited. Well, I'd been going through some cramping. And that generally happens if I'm going too fast. So I tried to smooth things out and, adjust my stroke so I was more long and smoothed out rather than, choppy and trying to turn over.
One of the things, the point I was making is that you got a kind of a rough start when you were swimming, and you still went on to win, and that was just incredible.
Well, I still beat the guys in my age group.
Yeah, and you, like I said, I have never thrown up and kept swimming. I'm sorry. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, and I mean, I threw up the first time, and then it went through my head, should I stop and, finish this and keep going? And I thought, no, there'll be 3 or 4 more strokes that you're going to have to do anyway. Just keep going. You throw up again, so what,
Well, that's an interesting start to a race. Now, Justin, I want to hear what was going through your mind when you how did your morning go, and what was your swim start?
Yeah, I mean, it went pretty well.
No throwing up in the water and keep swimming.
No throwing up. Yeah, it was pretty uneventful. I woke up at 4:00. It was pretty early start for typical races because the shuttle start out to Sand Hollow. Had my typical pre-race breakfast of 6 pieces of white bread, 2 bananas, plain black coffee, and peanut butter and jelly. I think it, very, very carb heavy, pretty easy on the stomach, but a little bit of fat and protein because I probably won't have fat and protein for the next 15 hours after that.
That's great. And there's people taking notes right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the 6 pieces of white bread, peanut butter in between each, and it takes like 20 minutes to get down. I usually I'll do
wash it down with black coffee,
hot dog eating contest, like a little water. It's pretty gross, but get it down, get in for over 1,000 calories, as Rick said, just because you want to not go into with any deficit. Show up to the swim start, set up the bike. I'm ready to roll. I'm a pretty strong swimmer. I swim 52 and I swam really, really easy. Actually swam easier than I ever had before, about 3 out of 10 effort. And, I worked with my coach on basically, hey, it's a long day. Like you're going to maybe get an extra minute or two in the swim if you push it at a 7 out of 10 effort, but the 3 out of 10 effort, you would build no lactate. And I got onto the bike fresher than I ever had before. I had a couple minutes down on the overall amateur who came in at 49. I probably could have swam 49, but it just wouldn't have been worth it. I could have lost 10 minutes.
Now, you realize how important it is what you just said. The fact that you were swimming 3 of 10 and you did a 53.
Yeah.
And what is that? That's about a minute and 10 second per 100 pace, right?
Yeah. So I'm 52:16, just looking at my time here. I don't know what the pace is. I never put too much stock into the pace because I think it changes with the currents. It changes with the, wetsuit versus non-wetsuit changes. I was basically just navigating, I swam through probably 1,000 people because I was one of the last age groups to start. I started at 7:30. So it was a pretty hectic swim. You had to stay focused. You couldn't really find a rhythm. You're basically just going like this the whole time. And so, it was good. I think the main takeaway is I built up throughout my training, just my ability to swim at a easier effort, smoother, slightly faster. I basically did no top end. I did no work above threshold, which is 108 for me per 100. So I did a lot of base work. I did my favorite set was 10 by 400 at 115 pace. And just felt really comfortable at that effort. It was,
I'm going to have to watch you swim a 115 pace at a 3 of 10 effort. That's just, I can't comprehend that. I'm sorry. I want to see it.
Yeah.
So good work on the swim. That's amazing. Especially, like I said, you're swimming that fast, that easy, saving some energy for the bike and the run.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll jump in here and we'll kind of move forward a little bit into the bike. So the bike course here, or at St. George, everybody was talking about it all week, right? And it needed to be respected. And that being said, my question to both of you, and we'll start with you, Justin, since you're on my screen, is what did you do different in this race compared to maybe if it was a flat race with limited wind? Was there some special things that you did to approach the bike maybe different than you normally would?
It's a funny question. There are a few things. I didn't nail the bike course. That's what I'll say. Which is awesome because it's fun to finish a race and achieve your goal, but also know how much room for improvement there is and things you'll do differently. So I have a lot of learned lessons. It was only my 3rd Ironman. It was really my first Ironman. Doing it in the shape that I'm in today. My last one was a year and a half ago. And so I went into this race. I probably didn't respect the bike course as much as I should have, to be perfectly honest. I went out really hard. I rode the first 50 miles over 25 mile an hour average. And I went, knowing I was killing it. I was holding watts. I averaged about 260 watts for the first 3 hours. I hit mile 75, started climbing and basically hit a pretty hard wall. And, I knew from a previous race that, just because I fade on the bike doesn't mean I won't be able to run, but I wanted to be pretty conservative. And so I think the things I did, things I would have done differently were I would have run a different cassette in the back. We don't have to get into all the nitty gritty gearing ratios and whatnot, but I kind of was I'm super strong. I can run a 55:42 and 11:28. Probably the wrong call. I was grinding up those hills at 50 RPMs. And I think that caused me to fade a bit. I also went out a little bit hard. I would have backed off maybe 5 to 10 watts the first 3 hours to save more for Snow Canyon. I think with a hilly course like this versus a flat course, to pace it correctly, you have to push above your average watts up the climbs. And so you just have to be ready to have a little bit more variance in the power output that you're doing versus just being at a steady linear output the whole time. And so that can be good and bad for certain riders. But you have to get comfortable pushing, in a little bit of an uncomfortable zone and then recovering. So it's almost that course was so rolling that it felt like an interval workout almost throughout the bike. And I think I rode that pretty well. As far as gear goes, I was back and forth literally until bike check about what front wheel to run. I ran a disc wheel in the back. Which I'm pretty comfortable with even in crosswinds. And then I ended up going with the big front wheel, which was the right call. But I think for most riders, deep wheels and a disc would have slowed you down because you would have had to come out of aero position. And then those gains all of a sudden become pretty wiped out. And so, yeah, those were just a few of the lessons. I think the other thing is nutrition. I target 90 grams of carbs per hour, which is equivalent to 360 calories per hour. I really, all of that carried on the bike. I don't do special needs because I don't want to lose the time. And so I go into it with 3 bottles, all set up. And, around hour 4, I kind of just got soft, and I shouldn't have done that. I basically was like, my stomach's kind of full. I feel good. I'll be fine. And then I ended up about, I want to say an hour short of the calories that I had targeted. I really only took in like 4 hours of calories over a 5-hour period of time. I think that, those little calculations can bite you later on. I was actually talking to Christian Blumenfeld's coach after the race, and Christian did 120 grams of carbs per hour, which is crazy. Like, I don't know, they train their guts so much at that pace. And so that's another takeaway is throughout the summer when I do my long rides, like I'm going to have a couple of them where I'm really forcing myself to take in just a massive amount of calories so that I can be fully fueled for the run and have zero deficit, which is harder said than, easier said than done, because you deal with GI issues or you deal with, whatever else might come up.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up about the calories, because, we start looking at kilojoules, right? Kilojoules or kilocalories burned. When you're doing 260 watts, there's more, you're burning way more calories than you think, right? Yeah. Where if you're doing 200 watts or 160 watts, you're not burning nearly as much calories. And when you look at like age groupers, like the typical age grouper in that race was probably 180 watts, right? So their kilojoule count is a lot less. And you look at Christian Blumenfeld, he's 330 watts probably. So now his kilojoule count gets even higher. So he absolutely has to do that. And if you want to race at that level, you have to do the same. And it's not easy to train your gut to do that. Like it takes a concerted effort.
It's an exponential increase as opposed to an arithmetic increase.
Exactly. So Rick, same question for you. How did you approach the bike course? Maybe differently than you would have if it was.
I got on the bike, and on the early bike, I vomited a couple more times, and then I was a little bit more solid. I got water in my right goggle on the swim, and I didn't want to stop and clear it, so I didn't. Well, I got on the bike and found I couldn't see very well. My right eye was really blurry, so I only had left eye vision, and I was a little bit cold too, and it took me about an hour to warm up, from that. As far as nutrition is concerned, I was, my plan was to consume. I had CarboPro in a water bottle. I was going to pick up Gatorade, at stops, and that was my plan. The trouble was with the vomiting, I couldn't keep anything down. And I finally figured out that I could keep Coke down, but Coke was a problem because there was only like one person at each aid stop giving away Coke. And if they're turned back towards the table and you go by, you just missed it. Well, I finally figured I had some shot blocks, and I tried some of those, and those worked. So I finally figured out I would eat shot blocks and take on water. There's plenty of water on the course. So that's what I ended up doing, shot blocks and water. But I was not consuming anywhere near the number of calories and the amount of fluid that I should have been. And I knew that going in, and I knew that the run was really going to be torture. But, I was kind of in, when Lionel talks about his, I was short on fuel and short on water, and, went into the run. Well, I don't sweat as much as Lionel, and I don't go as fast as him either. But, I knew that that's what I was going to be going into on the run, and it was going to be painful. Now, as far as Justin and I were talking ahead of time, and we were both saying that, now he's got a 2x setup, I have a 1x setup, but we both said, we needed cassettes with a much bigger final gear to climb Gunlock and Snow Canyon. We needed to go to the next gear up. What we thought was adequate, the next one that we would have gone to, that's what we should have done. So.
And that's amazing in itself that, I know Justin was climbing with a 42.28 It's
Yeah,
like, that's
yeah.
insane for that.
I was
steep of
I was
hill.
climbing with a 54 36.
I
Which when you
know.
figure it out, it's about the same. And I use long cranks. I got 190 cranks, and they make a circumference about 10% bigger than a 170, which is what, conventionally somebody like me would be on. And so I figured that, it's 10% easier for me to push I need 10% less strength. Now I got to go farther, but it's, I've got a little bit more gearing there, and I figured that. And I raised the question, and Ted and John and Justin all commented about what kind of gearing that they were using. And so I realized I have to go to a easier gear than my 1132. So I did 1136 and figured that the other, and all you guys are way faster than me on the bike, but I figured I had another 10% in hand because I was using those longer cranks.
I've never heard of a crank that long. I mean, yeah, it's like
Well, you buy
190.
them. You buy
Because
them.
you're not all that
specially.
tall.
And I got I got a P4 with the old bottom brackets that screw in. They're not press in bottom brackets like the new ones. So I've got a square taper shaft there. So all I need to do is get square taper cranks. And for mountain bikes, there's tons of different square taper cranks around. So I've got.
I love hearing all this talk about nutrition and the technical part of biking. You both are very strong on the bike, and it really is impressive to see the bike rides that you had. But now I'm going to switch gears and I'll go to the run. So we're in the third segment of that race. One, I'll steal Bob's question he always likes. How did you feel coming off the bike? And then the other part, I'm interested in the run segment because that's usually where we hit that dark spot, somewhere along the way. And I'd love to hear if you did hit it, and then how you got out of it. Yeah, Rick, we'll start with you on this one. So, how'd you feel getting off the bike, and then tell us about the dark spot and how you got out of it.
My first dark spots were on the bike.
Oh.
I knew I wasn't taking in enough nutrition. I knew I wasn't taking in enough fluid. And I got to Gunlock, and that was a real hard climb for me. In fact, it was harder to do that than it was Snow Canyon for me. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was in my head, but it was harder to do Gunlock for me than Snow Canyon. The first real dark spot I had was coming back down into St. George. We were going so fast, and I got my bike set up to glide fast because, if I can't climb or, that it's free speed, you're going downhill, you just rip. And I've got mine to go fast. And I would be surprised if I was not going over at some point 50 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. It just wouldn't bother me. And Justin said he was over 50 miles an hour. So, and the road was rough, and there were some, I was starting to get some crosswinds. And, at those kind of speed, I don't want to die out on a race.
So, yeah, I was thinking of that. And so how did you get out of that dark spot to stay focused on the bike?
I'm coming down, and I'm knowing I'm going to have to do this again once I do Snow Canyon. I'm going to be more tired. Mm-hmm. And, I asked myself, should you quit? You're doing well. Just, give yourself a margin of safety. And so I started braking on on those steep downhills like that. If I felt like I was going really fast, I've got the Morph Tech bar, so my brakes are right there with my hands. So I can be in a narrow position and squeeze those brakes. Well, I found out real fast that if I just kept the brakes on, I could smell the brake pad. I have rim brakes. I could smell the brake pads melting.
Oh, good grief.
What I had to do, and it's the same thing used to happen all the time in the Tour de France. And they said, well, what you do is that, you hit the brakes for a little bit, and then you let it up and let your speed gain up. And air is flowing over those things real fast. So they'll cool pretty quick, and then you squeeze again, and then, then you let them go. And And I know that with the old aluminum rims, you could heat up the rims so much you could blow a tire.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure you can do that on the newer carbon fiber rims, but I wasn't willing to find out.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got off the bike. I made it through that second lap and was still too fast, but I was very careful, and as careful as I felt I could be. And I got off the bike and got into transition, and I knew in transition I had about 200 calories of Carbo Pro, and I had some salt stick. I knew I was probably a little bit low on salt, and I had 200 milligrams of caffeine, and I just took all that down, and went out on the run, and I knew right from coming out of transition, before I hit the hill up diagonal, I knew that this was going to be a real rough run.
Yeah.
And when I got on diagonal, it was really tough. But after I got, I'm going to say near the top of diagonal, I started. It's like I made the switch from biking to running, and the running was going a little bit better. And so I thought, well, maybe I will make this. And I got through the first quarter when you get down to the park to turn around. That was pretty good. And then coming back up, it started bothering me a little bit. My legs started getting a little sore in that. And then especially coming back down for the turnaround to go back out again. And then that second lap was sheer torture.
Yeah.
It was just, you want to quit, about every 10 steps. And then you have to tell yourself, no, see that signpost up there? That's you. Just don't think about the rest of the race. Just get there, and then you pick something else out and you just get there. And because if you think about, you got another 10 or 15 miles to go, you'll never do it.
No,
If it's a few hundred feet, and if you can see it, then, I can do that. Well, let's just do that,
That's great. I love that. That's great. That's great advice as well. So Justin, how about you? Tell us about your dark spot. Did that happen before the run, or how do you feel getting off the bike, and how'd you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, it did. Like I hit the wall around mile 80 of the bike and just tried to push in. My watts just dropped significantly. I basically averaged 260 for 3.5 hours, and then I averaged 200 for an hour and 20 minutes. Finished on 4:44, which I knew was a good time. I should have been at 4:35, 4:38, I think, if I'd sustained that power through all the way to the end. So that's something to, work on. I think I need a couple more 150-mile rides leading into a big race, like Sam Long style, just big, easy volume is kind of the name of the game, I think, for being able to sustain that sort of thing all the way to the finish line. But
well, you'll be able to hold longer in Kona.
Yeah,
not as many hills. So
right
away, I think
burning matches throughout St. George constantly. Like
the
number of times I was over 300, just under my threshold, was too many for an Ironman at the end of the day.
Now, did you have a pad melt experience like Rick did?
No, I did not. Fortunately, I have disc brakes. To be honest, I don't know if I used them. I was just trying to fly down the hills as fast as possible. But I wasn't really pedaling. I was using the downhills to just coast all the way down to save my legs for the run.
I figured you'd be pedaling at 50 miles an hour,
Yeah. I was 70.3 worlds in the fall. I got the KOM on the downhill, actually. I rode 310 watts all the way down the hill. It probably wasn't smart, like outriding the pros on the downhill. I compared my time to them, and they put like 4 minutes into me on the climb and recovered on the downhill. So I actually learned, I'm like, this is just like a really inefficient way to ride for speed. Like I'm not doing that again. So I pushed up Snow Canyon.
All right, well, get us to the run. I want to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I put the run shoes on and felt pretty good, like to my surprise. You never know. I never know at least how I'm going to feel on the run from the bike. Like I've had days where I feel amazing getting off the bike and then my run legs aren't there, and vice versa. And this was one of those days where I would say I felt horrible the last hour of the bike, and then the first hour of the run went really well. I went out at a comfortable pace, effort, heart rate, like in the mid 140s for me is kind of my sustained, easy, quote unquote, easy effort. And I ran the first half marathon really well, actually. I ran it in like 134 or something, 135 maybe, which was right on target. Like my sort of like big stretch reach goal was to run 310. And my fastest marathon in an Ironman to date was 325. So I knew I could do better than that. And yeah, I did by 1 minute. I ran 324, but it was ugly. The back half. I mean, to go from basically running 7:10 pace for a half marathon straight into 8:10 pace is tough. And your heart rate drops. It's not a question of your aerobic capacity anymore. It's just getting the legs to turn over and keeping them moving. Again, I don't think I nailed enough calories the first half of the run. I think I took in like 200 calories an hour. Maybe I really should have been more like double that, but my stomach was sloshing. And again, I got soft. Like I was talking to my buddies who ran really well, and they're like, oh, I didn't want to do it, but I did it. I forced it down, force fed myself, jammed it down my throat. And I was just like, oh, I just didn't do that. I just kind of skipped it. So, I knew at the turnaround I was winning my age group by 12 minutes. And I was like, wow, that's a big gap. And I was in 5th overall amateur. And so the overall amateur race was sort of out of reach for me at that point. And my goal going into this was to win my age group. And so, I was like, all right, now it's mine to blow. And I kind of got pretty negative with myself, I would say, the whole second half of the run. As Ted knows, who actually came up on me as he was on his first lap, I was on my second lap around mile 20. I was in a dark spot, and I was cursing to myself and basically saying, you're effing winning and you're blowing it, and like trying to kind of use negative self-talk to keep me going. And I would say that kind of went on from about mile 18 to 24, where I didn't know how that gap was, because I knew it was 12 minutes, but I knew I was going backwards about a minute per mile. And so I was like, this is going to be close. Well, it turns out the guy who I was racing, who was in second, was also going backwards a minute per mile the whole second half, as most people on that course were. Like, it was an absolutely brutal run. And so, yeah, Ted came by me, actually gave me some salt, jammed that down my throat, like a little spray bottle, and started keeping moving, avoided the quad cramps, which were coming on just subtle, basically everywhere. Wasn't really one spot. And yeah, once you get to that final climb, you descend into town, and I saw my coach at mile 23, and she's like, you did it, like, push it. And so I pushed it down that final hill, and it was a fun final 5K, because I knew I had achieved my goal of winning. And despite the pain, I did back off, admittedly. I was like, I don't care if I go 9:06 or 9:07, whatever I ended up doing, something like that. What was it? 9:08. So I didn't care if I went 9:07 or 9:08. I was like, I'm going to smile and enjoy this one. Slowed down a little bit, soaked it in, high-fived all the way through the finish chute, and saw my family there to take the age group W, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, we'll come back to the finish line, but I really love both of your stories, that you just sort of absorb these hard spots, and you just deal with it, and you expect them, and you get through it. So I really very impressive, and that's why you're both at the top of the podium. So
yeah, a big thing I've started to do is the day before the race, I'll just pull up my iPhone, and in the notes section, I'll write a race mantra for each leg of the race, so that I basically just have one or two very, very simple, 5 to 10 word sayings that I'll repeat to myself over and over and over. On the swim, it's a long day, slow down. Yeah. Basically, my motto constant was just slow down, slow down, slow down. Yeah. On the bike, it was stomp the field. And so I would just get in my head in that positive mindset, like, all right, this is where you're going to win the race. Like, I know that's where I can be strong. And maybe I said that too many times the first half of the bike. And then on the run, it was sort of like any deep emotional, psychological trick you can play on yourself. For me, it was, your family came all the way out here. And so I would just, and you're going to be a MFN world champion if you push it. So it was basically those two things, like just repeating over and over, the positive self-talk kind of mixed with the negative, and alternating between those psychological tricks, I think is like one of the ways to be able to really go deep in these races.
I love it. Bob, that's great. Thank you. Bob, what do you got?
I was just wondering, you're the world champion and you're 28 years old. I just wondering how that feels, man.
Yeah, I mean, it feels good. I think, you know, it's two different things. Like I have a, you know, a growth mindset, as like everybody does in this sport, and you're always chasing the next thing. And you're, you know, most people are never satisfied in this sport. You talk to Christian Blumenfeld, who just won a gold medal and won the Ironman World Championship, and now he's like, oh, I want to win Kona, right? And it's like 3 days later. And so you kind of, you know, I try to find a balance between like reflecting upon the last 4 or 5 years in the sport. Like 4 years ago, I did a 6-hour half Ironman, you know, and like it's kind of crazy that
That's crazy.
where I am today. Like it's just been consistency. There's no secret. It's just been really focused effort every day. And so I'm pretty proud of myself for sure. But I also, you know, yeah, I'm a world champion, but it's the age group, right? Like Sam Long is younger than me, and Justin Metzler is in that pro race. And so I look at those guys, and Christian Blumenfeld's probably my age. I think he's like 30, 29. And so,
They're
you know,
pros and you have a job. Come on,
there's
man.
pros, and yeah, they're pros, and I have a job for sure. But you always want to see what you can achieve. And as long as I'm going up into the right, like I definitely have my sights set on even bigger goals. You know, I want to do well in Kona against a larger and more competitive international group that would be there probably, or certainly will be there, as Rick knows. Like it's just a more competitive race than St. George was probably as far as depth of field. And then, you know, if I win a few more 70.3s this year, which is my goal, win overall amateur in Coeur d'Alene and Boulder, I'll probably go pro next year and see what I could do against the guys that are doing this full time. And, you know, I think I'd like to line up with the best and have that dynamic swim and bike, and, you know, never say never. Like in 8 years from now, I think maybe it's a long shot, but I'd like to be on the podium of the pro races. Like, I don't think my goal is certainly not to like win the world championship in the pro race. I'm not quitting my job by any means, but I think it's a long game in this sport, and consistency is king. And so
Yeah,
I'm excited about the future.
Real important.
Despite winning one race, you know, this weekend.
While we're talking about world champions, Rick, I mean, you've been there before. How does this compare to Kona? Do you mind if we ask? Well, the
Not at
course
all.
itself.
Not at all. Kona is all about the heat. If you can't handle it, you know, you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, you can't handle the heat, you're going to walk in Kona. That's the truth. So and I prepare for heat with sauna. It probably helped me some up in St. George. It's absolutely essential when you go to Kona.
Did you like this course?
I like the course, except for those screaming fast downhills. I felt that those were,
It was dangerous.
dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, you know, I'm not in this sport to lose my life in a crash, and you know, it's just no, you know, and I don't mind going 30 miles an hour on a downhill, or even 35, like you know, that's relatively safe speed. But like I say, I believe we were above 50 miles an hour, and Justin has the data to prove that he was, which is something I do a little bit different than Justin. Justin's got all kinds of data to back him up. I'll do heart rate and things like that. I do heart rate mostly when I train. But I remember talking to Natasha Bodman years ago, and she says, "Oh, you know, heart rate and power meter, and keeping track of fluid intake and all that." She says, "I do that in training, but I don't do any of it when I race." She said, "I race by feel." You know, and the idea is, I think, is that she would always get herself trained to do the right things, and then she would just execute when she was in the race. And she'd do incredible things. I mean, I saw a video of her where on her cheetah bike, where she was in the aero bars, and she'd reach her hand out to the side, and she would grab a water bottle, and so she would never get up in her base bars to get a water bottle. And just unbelievable, that is incredible as far as I was concerned. So there's the heat's a factor there, and Justin has limiting problem that I don't have, and that is that he can generate a lot more speed than me, and therefore burns a lot more calories, therefore generates a lot more heat. And that's the problem. Alan Lim, who was a physiologist and worked with Floyd Landis. I heard him give a talk one time, and he said for every additional, and Floyd was a very good cyclist. He said for every additional 100 calories that you put into a bike in effort to go faster, only 25 calories actually goes to motion. The other 75 calories are given off as heat from the reactions to create that motion. And he said, you start putting in 100 calories and more 100 calories and another 100 calories, pretty soon getting rid of heat is your biggest problem, especially on a hot day. And definitely Kona will be a hot day.
Okay.
And it's the same thing with calorie consumption. I don't need as many calories an hour as Justin does because I'm not going to be going as fast as him. I can't burn through those calories. I don't have the muscles to burn through those calories that he does. So, his calorie consumption is going to be really high.
That's something to think about the efficiency of the engine that we have here. So,
well, yeah, and
especially at your level.
Right. And everybody's got a bit different efficiency in their engine, and everybody can improve their efficiency.
You still have to get rid of the heat.
Yeah, there are only a few people who can, and obviously Justin's one of them, who can, do that so efficiently to, become as good as he is. I'm a bit lucky in that I'm older, and if I was born 10 years, if I was 10 years younger, I would not be nearly as good as I am because I know what I was doing 10 years younger, and those guys 10 years younger than me are going like bullets compared to what I used to do. The sport's evolving very, very quickly, and each generation is, and I saw this when I was in swimming when I was young, each generation is faster, and you're trying to outrace the generation that's coming up,
Speaking of the generations that are coming up here, before we run out of time, I want to get the two of you, your message to the people who are doing their first couple of sprints. They're just getting started on this. Like you've got success. So what could you impart upon the folks who are actually idolizing you right now and just getting started? And what would you tell them?
Start out slow. If you have a choice between going too slow and too fast in a race, go too slow, because you can always improve on that. If you go too fast and you torture yourself, you'll never, and you torture yourself, where you're halfway through the bike and you're a basket case, you'll have no idea what you would do on the run. But if you started out slow, you could say, well, I did this. The next one, I'm going to go a little bit faster doing, and
see what it
bike,
does.
and I'll go a little bit faster.
Smart.
And you can adjust all three phases. If you torture yourself, and normally it happens on the bike, if you torture yourself on the bike, all you've learned is that you're going too fast. You're going too fast on the bike.
Right.
You really don't learn a ton about the run because you're torched. You're nowhere near. I mean, you're near your limit, but only because you've because you've gone too fast on the bike. And you might as well learn. But to learn about all three, start out slow and just incrementally increase. Now,
very good. Very good advice.
If you have a coach, they can help you. And
yeah,
as to where to start off.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think like there's a few things. It always depends on your level and how seriously you want to take things. I mean, if you're just starting off, like, I think the two basic things are like find a group to train with. Like, it's going to make it fun. You're going to learn so much. I would never be where I am today if I hadn't trained in a group for years as I was just starting off in the sport, because you're constantly surrounded by people that are faster than you. I think that's super key. People that'll push you in each sport. And just teach you. Like, I didn't know what aero bars were. I didn't know how to fuel. I didn't know how to pace my run. I didn't know what a tempo versus aerobic run was. And you learn just so much. Like there's so much to learn in this sport, and it takes a year or two to truly learn all of that knowledge. And so surround yourself with people. There's so many great groups in Las Vegas, swim, bike, and run that you can become a part of. And it keeps the motivation high. And then I think the second thing is like, stick to a plan. And, for me, for the first 2 years in the sport, as I was getting into it, it was just as simple as like writing it down on a calendar sometimes, or a piece of paper or a notebook, saying, hey, I'm going to train 10 hours this week. And these are generally, I'm going to bike this day, I'm going to run this day, I'm going to swim this day, and actually stick to it. That has now evolved into a sort of like highly scientific training program that I build with my coach that spans the course of a year and has different build phases and different taper phases, and I build my race schedule around that. But like, it took years to get to that point. Like, the first step is just, okay, I'm going to commit to a certain amount of training and build to a race. And so the other thing that I would just share with people is like, you don't need to jump to an Ironman when you're starting off in this sport. I certainly did not. And I had no plans to do a full Ironman until I was probably like 30 when I was starting off in the sport at 23, 24, but got a Kona slot in a half Ironman, surprisingly, and ended up being like, oh, well, I guess I got to take it. Like, can't say no to Kona. And that was my first Ironman. And so I just think, the Olympics, like, especially for the younger athletes that are coming up, and younger, I mean, like, in their 30s and their 40s, you have a long time to get good at this thing. You have, 5 to 10 years to achieve a goal. You don't need to go sign up for an Ironman out of the blue and try to train for 3 months and suffer through it at 17 hours or DNF. Like, I think there's a lot of fun to be had in the sport, and some great Olympic races locally, half Ironmans that are more approachable, that are just going to not destroy your body and be, just as fulfilling, I think, at the end of the day, and probably more fun. Like, I finished that Ironman. I was like, and even still, I'm not thinking I'll do any fulls next year. I'll do Kona and then probably shift my focus back to half Ironman for a year or two, just because I think you peak in Ironman later in life, as well as you build the engine for years. And it just, I want to be like Rick, having done 26 Ironmans in my 70s, not have a double knee replacement at 42. Oh, right. So that's kind of my approach to the sport, and something I share with a lot of people is like, choose races that are approachable and suitable to your abilities, that you're going to be able to train hard for and enjoy at least 90% of the race. You're not going to enjoy the last 5K, nor should you. You should be suffering, but you shouldn't be suffering the whole run and battling injuries and, risking,
well over 99% of the people are in this sport for their health. And, if you get to an Ironman before you're ready, it's liable to be a one and done. And that's probably not a good thing. You would be better off to build into it and then be able to repeat it on some kind of a schedule. Okay. And it might be one a year or one every couple of years or whatever it is. But you don't want it to be so hard on your system that you feel like, one and done, man. This is it. I'm not doing this again,
Yeah. And I think the volume too, the volume required to do an Ironman well is so much greater, just in terms of work, life, family balance. Like, it just is like you can't, I don't know, from my perspective, at least at my level, like, you can't do an Ironman well if you're training less than 15 hours a week on average. Like, you can maybe fake your way through it at 12 hours a week, but a lot of people don't have that. And for the first time this year, I'm training, 18 to 20 hours a week. But for the last couple of years, it's been 10 to 12. And that's been super manageable. I enjoy it. I don't start resenting it. My fiance doesn't resent me for just being on all day on Saturdays. Like, so for most people, like, it's not really in the cards to just turn everything else off in their life to put in the necessary volume.
Now, Ted was sitting there he had a very knowing smile on his face, because Ted, I don't know if people realize it, but Ted's an outstanding coach in his own right, and not only an outstanding triathlete, but he's like I said, he's an outstanding coach. Do you have any questions that you would like to,
the last
comments for that?
Yeah, actually, I have one question for both of you. And it's a question that even as a coach, I struggle with the athletes I work with. And I struggle with myself is, what's the time after this race that you're not going to train, and what is the going back into training like? I know we're going a little bit late, so if if you can answer relatively shortly, that'd be great. Or if you want to expand, that's fine too. But
that's a good question.
Go first.
Okay. It depends on with me, it depends on how old I have been. Between about 55 and 65, I would train for and do, I did the first 7 Ironman Louisvilles, and came out of there one way or another with a Kona slot, and 6 or 7 weeks later raced in Kona and never had a bad race. I'm not too sure I could do that now. My recovery is slower. Being that bullheaded to do that, I'm not quite that bullheaded anymore. So that I would say, and a lot of guys in my age group back then would say they can't do that. They like to race in June or July, and then and then be able to work up for Kona again. So I don't know. Right now I know I'm about 23 weeks away from Kona, and I think that's about right. So I have my brother-in-law had a heart attack with 6 bypasses. He's still in the hospital. We're going this weekend, and his wife's got dementia, and we're going this weekend to see him, and kind of help take care of his wife and that, and his Nancy will stay. This is her sister who has dementia, and I'll be there for the weekend, and I'll come back and I'll start getting into regular training then. I'm doing some training now. I got in the water, swam 4,500 today. So, but that's the first that I've swam. Well, I didn't swim fast. I didn't swim fast. So you 4,500, Justin, you go so fast that 4,500 to you is like, that's crazy. Yeah. But if you were swimming with me back where I am, you'd be okay with 4,500.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm, basically shutting it down for 2 weeks. I'll just keep moving, but no structure. Basically, nothing in Training Peaks. My coach will just say, do whatever you want, but keep it super easy. So, I woke up feeling like I need to move my body. Went and swam 1,500 yards.
Yeah.
Came home and drank 2 beers and literally ordered Chick-fil-A to my couch, which I never do. So I'm pretty extreme. Like I'll go on like a week-long bender where I basically just drink beer and wine and eat ice cream for a week, and can't wait to watch the Warriors game, which is on right now, and eat banana muffins or whatever my fiance made. So like I treat myself definitely after a full Ironman, and pretty much every time after every race, I basically like do a hard reset, kind of binge, probably put on 3 or 4 pounds in a week. And then I go super hard and I flip the switch. That's just kind of an approach that works for me. Like I also do the same thing in the off season, like December, I shut it down. I do a month of like 6 to 8 hours a week, ride my gravel bike, go on 1 or 2 runs a week, basically don't swim for 2 months. And then January 1st this year, I was like, it's on. And I've trained harder and been more motivated than ever before since January 1st of this year. And I think some of that was due to just a really strong reset in November, December of last year. So the next 2 weeks will be fun. I got some buddies coming to visit Vegas this weekend. I'm going to treat it like a tourist and do a little partying, and probably won't do much. And I'm actually not feeling great today. Like I think I'm a little under the weather. I think my immune system is kind of like depressed, but my body's coming around, which is good. I think some of that comes from like riding so hard. It's not like I didn't push my physical musculoskeletal system super hard. I was much more sore after doing an open marathon in December. I ran like, I don't know, 235 or 236 there. And like that hurts, like that my bones hurt for a month. And this, I'm like, my muscles are really sore and deep fatigue, but I'm coming around pretty well. So I'll take 2 weeks and then I'll start a build for 70.3 Coeur d'Alene at the end of June. And then again, I'm getting married in July. So I'll take, hard reset, another 3 or 4 weeks. So I'll kind of do these really focused 6 weeks block, 2 to 3 weeks recovery, 6 week hard block race, 2 to 3 week recovery. And so that's going to work pretty well for me this year. I think just these small builds, and hopefully it, it gradually goes up and to the right, but it's not linear for sure. It's cyclical with focused blocks. And the shortest answer to your question, Ted, is probably 2 weeks, and then I'll be back into it.
Okay. No, it's great because, I think that a lot of people, the first 2 or 3 days when you can't really move, right? So it's not a thing, but it's like, oh, okay, I think I can go for a bike ride. I think I could. And I think that oftentimes people are chasing I don't even know, the demons from the race.
Yeah.
And you can't chase those demons. You got to actually, you have to let your body recover so you don't start in a hole.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people start their next block too soon, and they actually start off in a hole, and because they haven't recovered. And I think that we underestimate the fatigue, and it's not just muscular, it's central fatigue as well. Like your neurologic system, your immune system, your endocrine system, all of these things, obviously play a role in our just our general health and well-being. So I applaud both of you for being smart about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
faster you recover, the faster you can get back into real training. And so I think it's all about just like figuring out how to recover most efficiently and the fastest before starting back in it too early.
Yeah, and I think it's my best guess, my opinion, that there are differences in terms of who can recover how quick.
Agreed.
100%.
Yeah. We've talked about that, I think, before in our podcast, and maybe with Rick when you were even on, we talked about the genetics for collagen deposition. And there are definite genetic markers for people that can actually lay down more collagen than others in recovery. And we tend to call those pro athletes because they almost all have that genetic predisposition.
Yes.
And some people, and the worst part is, there's a bunch of people walking around the neighborhood probably that have that, and they don't even know it.
They have no idea.
They never push
no
themselves.
Bottle it up, and I love, my goodness, what a great discussion here. And we are at an hour, and I said I would start trying to wrap us up around 45 minutes, but this is just so interesting. And I really appreciate your honesty and being generous with your time talking about this. But I have one question, given we're at the end here. 1 or maybe 3 words describe crossing that finish line, because I think you both knew you had won your age group at that point and you were world champions. So 1 or 3 words going down that red carpet, what was going through your mind?
And I said it in my write-up, coming back on that, on the last half of that second lap of the run, I was remembering what Sam McGlone, who's been 70.3 world champion and did, and this was years ago, and did do some Ironmans. And I think she was second or third in Kona one year, as I recall. I would have to check it to be sure. But one of the things that she said was, always run. You just want to get there. If you walk, you just prolong the agony, just run. Then the other one that was the year that Paula Newby-Fraser, who ended up winning 8 Kona Ironmans, won more Konas than any other person ever. Paula Newby-Fraser one year collapsed 400 meters from the finish. And it took her about 45 minutes to be able to gather herself, to walk, to get up and walk across the finish line. And of course, people got across the line before her because of that. But if Paula Newby-Fraser can collapse 400 meters before the finish line, I can't let up mentally until I make that last step over the line, because there's no telling what will happen.
That's right.
So I just was trying to hold everything together mentally physically it was falling apart, but mentally to just keep myself gathered together as much as I could to get across that line. Because once I got across that line, it's not over till it's over.
I love it.
So those were the two things that I was thinking about on the run.
Yeah.
As I got across the line, it was a relief, and it was the other two times that I had won. Well, the first time that I won, I didn't know it till about a half hour later. The second time I won, I knew it because, well, I knew the guy that was coming up on me, Roberto Azevedo from Brazil. I turned around the energy lab and was coming back out. And when I was coming back out, I saw him and I knew he was running faster than me, but I had to just keep him from getting to me. And I was able to do that. So the second time I knew that I had won, but it was like torture until I actually got across the line because he was coming on and I didn't know exactly where he was.
Yeah.
This one, and just today it began to sink in. I won by like 40 or 41 minutes. And in a world championship, that is so far.
Mhm.
I mean, even not a well-attended world championship like this one, I don't think it was as well-attended internationally. Although Roberto was there, I was concerned about him. Roberto can really run.
So Rick, I love it. I mean, you've these finish lines are so meaningful for you, but I really like this idea that it's not done until you cross that finish line. So Justin, I'm curious, coming down that red carpet, where were you? And you knew at that point that you'd won your age group and you're going to be world champion. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's a little tough. Like, I think, as Rick said, it takes a little while because you're in such deep pain and you're pushing yourself so hard. Like, emotionally, you try to have that, those feelings of, that dopamine rush and the feelings of elation, like, come on. And, but at the same time, like, it's almost better the next day when you wake up, you're like, wow, did it really happen? Like, you recover a little bit out of that hole. So I think the two words that I would say are proud and grateful. Like, I was definitely proud of myself. Like, it was definitely like a, holy shit kind of moment where I was like, I just did this, and I've had
Really did that.
Win St. George on a piece of paper, just written in Sharpie on the side of my trainer wall that I've been looking at since January 1st of this year. And so it's just, 5 months of really, really hard work and 5 years of pretty hard work finally coming to the fruition. And then grateful just because so many people around me have helped make it happen. Like my coach, my family that was out there, Las Vegas Tri Club, my team, Everyman Jack. So like all those people that just, you can't do this by yourself. And it was just, it was pretty amazing for sure.
I love it because you're great. You're a great representation of our club, and it's neat to say our club has two world champions as members, and so that is really impressive. Guys, thanks so much. This has really been a fun conversation, and I love just sort of the matter of fact approach that you take, but also you're both students of triathlon and obviously very knowledgeable. And I really appreciate the tidbits that you've shared here tonight. Bob, Ted, any final thoughts, words?
I'm going to kind of echo what you said, and there's been people that I've heard in the blogosphere that have said like Las Vegas is not a great place for triathlon.
Yeah, right.
Well, I have to disagree, right? We have two world champions in our club. This is a great triathlon town, and it's a great place to live, a great place to be, and a great place to train. And yeah, I'm super excited as well that we have this in our community, in our club.
As John said, we have evidence that this is you got two world champions in our club. I doubt that there is another club that has two winners, two age group world champions. But the one other thing I wanted to say, and I know that both you, Rick and Justin, feel the same way, because I saw you, and I heard your conversations after the race. Everybody, you won the races, you won your age groups, but there were a lot of people who finished it, which was superhuman on that course. And then there's a lot of people who towed the line, they qualified to get there, and then they raced in St. George as well. And I know you're proud of them as well as they are as you. So, and that's one thing that makes the club so cool. But thanks for your contribution to it.
One of the things, and I think that this needs to be said, is that take the easiest Ironman course in the world with a 25 to 30-year-old athlete, which is, or even, a less than 40-year-old athlete, and get them out there. And if he or she finishes that race in 16:59:59, that person is, in the population of the world, a massive anomaly. They are so far in front of everybody else in terms of dedication, stick-to-itiveness, even if they were the worst guy in that field to be dedicated and to stick to it, they're still so much better than the rest of the world.
And even the people who towed the line as well.
Yes.
Who made it that far.
Yes. And so to a certain extent, the goal is to finish. And, if you can finish and be proud of your effort, you won. I don't care what the place says. I don't care what the time says. You finish and be proud of your effort. You won. There's no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it's wonderful having y'all in the club. That's for sure. This is good.
Yeah.
This has been good.
Justin,
So
Rick,
sorry,
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more big thank you. There's a lot of comments on this video thread, a couple of questions, but you've got a bunch, big community behind each of you. We're all impressed. You inspire me. I know you inspire others, and this has just been a lot of fun chatting with you. So have a good evening, and can't wait to see the next race. This will be fun.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
All right.